Welcome to Proline TV here on this Thursday, April 3rd. Kevin Rogers with you as we take a look at the NHL for Thursday evening, and all from a first period perspective. That's what we do here on this video. We'll take a look at all the games, including a couple best bets at the end and some trends to look out for as well. So with all that being said, let's get right to it and let's look at the big sheet and the first game of the night, the Lightning and the Senators from Ottawa. And a big game for Tampa Bay as they are right in the middle of that race for first place in the Atlantic Division. Meanwhile, the Senators, they come in with the first wild card spot in the Eastern Conference. And Ottawa so far at home in the first period, not great, 11, 12, and 11, while Tampa Bay 11, 15, and 12 on the road. So both teams have not been great in the first period in those splits, but also Tampa Bay 21 and 16 to the over so far in the first period on the road. First, for the Ottawa Senators, they are coming off back-to-back losses to Pittsburgh and Buffalo. They've been a good over team of late, 4-1 to the over in the first period the past 5 games, but allowed 2 goals against Buffalo back on Tuesday night in that 5-2 loss. Meanwhile, for the Lightning, they've been a very good over team of late in the first period, 6 consecutive overs. They hit the over against the Islanders back on Tuesday, and so far 4 straight games with a goal in the first period for Tampa Bay, and even back-to-back overs in their last or 3 straight overs on the road, back-to-back overs to end their previous road trip at Utah and Vegas. So we could see goals here between Tampa Bay and Ottawa when they meet up. The next matchup, the Bruins and Canadiens, a couple of original 6 teams meeting up. The Bruins have been a complete disaster of late. And you look back at this, Boston, last time they won was on March 11th against the Panthers, a game they were trailing 2-0 and scored 3 late goals. But since then, 9 consecutive losses for the Bruins. They're not going to go to the playoffs this year. And also, during this stretch, they have led 1 time after the first period. That came against Buffalo, a game they actually lost in overtime. But the Bruins, though, 3 straight games, they have not scored a goal in the first period. And 5 of the past 6, they haven't scored a goal in the opening period. Meanwhile, for Montreal, off that big overtime win over the Panthers back on Tuesday, they've had a stretch where they have not led after the first period. And that goes back 8 straight games since they led the Panthers 2-0 back on March 15th. And since then, 8 in a row, they have not led after the first period. And in all 8, they have given up a goal in the first period, and 9 straight games they have hit the over in the first period. So we'll see if Montreal can make it 10 in a row in the first period as far as hitting the over. The Avalanche and the Blue Jackets from Columbus, as Colorado on the second of a back-to-back. The first time they played in Denver back on October 12th, the Blue Jackets won that game 6-4. They led 2-1 after the first, and the Blue Jackets won that game convincingly with 6 goals. For Colorado, we're going to start with them. They have not trailed after the first period. When you go back since the Chicago game, or since Toronto rather, back on March 8th, and this Avalanche team with no rest, they are very good in the first period. Let's see if we have that note here. 6-0-3 the last 9 with no rest in the first period. So it's been good for Colorado of late. Meanwhile, for Columbus, they went through a 14-game stretch. 14 straight games they didn't lead after the first period, but they did lead Nashville 3-1 at the end of the first back on Tuesday. Won that game 8-4, and Columbus has quietly won 3 of 4, and they're trying to get that second wild card spot in the Eastern Conference. Also 5 consecutive overs in the first period for the Blue Jackets. The Penguins and the Blues in St. Louis. The Blues have won 10 consecutive games. They have just been the hottest team in the NHL. They're getting hot at the right time, and they're trying to grab one of those 2 wild card spots in the Western Conference. And even during the stretch, they started out very well in these games, except for that Nashville game on March 27th. They trailed 2-0 after 1. They came back with 3 unanswered goals to win 3-2. But St. Louis has trailed just once during the stretch through 20 minutes, and they went scoreless with Detroit for 2 periods in that game back on Tuesday. Ended up winning 2-1 in overtime. Also snapped a 4-game over streak in the first period for the Blues. But St. Louis, when you look back at when they last faced Pittsburgh on March 13th, that was the last time they lost. They were down 1-0 after one. They lost that game 5-3. They've run off 10 straight wins. So St. Louis been on fire. Meanwhile, for the Penguins, what they have done of late, they were on a 6-game over streak in the first period before hitting the under against Ottawa on Sunday, a game they won in overtime on Sidney Crosby's game-winning goal that snapped a 3-game losing streak. But also Pittsburgh at home, they have been good in the first period, 5-0-1 in the last, actually make it 6-0-1 the last 7 games. And the last time they trailed after the first at home was back on March 1st against Boston. So Pittsburgh has been very good. Actually, I messed that whole thing up. I apologize for that. Let me recant that, because looking back at it, this game, even though they have played well at home, on the road, the Penguins, the last 2, they lost to Tampa Bay and Buffalo. Before that, they led the Panthers 2-1. So we're just going to take that one, scratch that from the record. But regardless, the Penguins have still been good overall in the first period recently. Better at home than on the road, but we'll see if they can snap St. Louis's winning streak coming up. The Predators and the Stars in Dallas, as they are hooking up. And we're going to start with the Stars because they're back from this West Coast swing. They took the final 2 in Seattle. They swept it by beating Edmonton, Calgary, beating the Kraken twice, and they have now won 6 straight games. Dallas got a firm hold of second place in the Central Division, and it's an always dangerous first game back from the road trip against a struggling team in Nashville. But also, when you look at what Dallas has done, since they struggled a bit there in mid-March in the first period, they are 5-0-1 in the first period in the past 6 games. So it's been pretty good for them. Meanwhile, for the Predators, they've lost 4 in a row. They were blown out early by Columbus on Tuesday. That was the second end of a back-to-back after they lost at Philadelphia back on Monday. And what's too bad about Nashville is they went through a nice little stretch, at least dating back to March 8th, where they had 9 games out of 12 going into Tuesday, not allowing a goal in the first period. Then Columbus torched them for 3. And the first 2 meetings with Dallas earlier this season for the Predators, they were scoreless after the first, back on December 12th in Dallas, ended up winning that game 4-1. And earlier, the opener of the season, 0-0 through 1, lost 4-3. So a couple scoreless first periods between Dallas and Nashville. We'll see if that keeps up coming up again on Thursday. The Kings are in Utah to take on the Hockey Club, and LA, who has been great at home, now they get out of Southern California, and you see what they did the last 2 games against San Jose and Winnipeg, outscoring them 12-2. But also in the first period, going back to March the 8th, they have allowed a total of 1 goal in the first period. So they are 10-0-4 in the last 14 games in the first period. And in the 4 ties, they didn't allow a goal. So very impressive, allowing just 1 goal so far in this stretch. Now they take on Utah, where they tied them at 1 at home back on February 22nd, won that game 5-3. And earlier in the season, when they played in LA, it was 0-0 in the first and a 3-2 win for the Kings. So this is going to be the first trip to Salt Lake City for the Kings. And taking a look at the Utah Hockey Club, they went on that 5-game over streak in the first period before hitting the under in the last 3. In the last 3 games, they haven't allowed a goal in the first period, so pretty impressive. Also coming off wins over Chicago and Calgary. Granted, teams not in the same ballpark as LA, but for Utah, a team that's still trying to get it together, they'll take those 2 wins. So we'll see how the Hockey Club reacts coming up on Thursday. The last game we're going to look at before we get to the best bets, the Oilers and the Sharks in San Jose. And we'll begin with the Sharks, and that has not been a good last stretch for them. 7-1, they've been outscored in the first period. The last 3 games, 4 straight overs during the stretch. And you see, look, against Anaheim, they came back and tied that game, forced the shootout, but ended up losing 4-3. But still, they've given up 18 goals in the last 3 games. Meanwhile, for the Edmonton Oilers, 4 consecutive games, they've not scored a goal in the first period. They have gone under in those 4 games. We see how Calvin Pickard has been in net with Stuart Skinner a little banged up. and we'll see if Edmonton can break that streak of not scoring in the first period when they meet up with San Jose. Now, let's get to our best bets. And there are going to be two late games, both involving Western Conference teams. So let's start with the Jets and the Golden Knights out in Vegas. We're going to take Winnipeg in the first period. And we go back to the sheet here. First for Winnipeg, off that loss to LA back on Tuesday. That's now back-to-back first period losses for them. And they were shut out both times. They did come back and beat Vancouver 3-1, but still trailed 1-0 after one. And against LA, they were down. They haven't played well against LA, and they trailed 2-0 after one, lost 4-1. But you got to expect Connor Hellebuck probably back in the net on Thursday against Vegas. Also for Winnipeg, in the first two meetings with Vegas, they led 1-0 early, lost 3-2 in overtime at home on December 12th, trailed 2-1 in Vegas on November 29th, lost 4-3. So those two matchups, and I believe that's it. And so they're looking for a little double revenge here. I think they get off to a good start. And taking a look at the Vegas Golden Knights, yes, they had been on fire. They had won 6 straight before losing to Edmonton on Tuesday, and they've been good in the first period. Also 3 straight unders, but I do think that Winnipeg here will be a little bit inspired after the LA loss and also trying to beat Vegas for the first time in 3 matchups. Again, this could be 2 division winners going at it. Winnipeg's going to win the Central, and we'll see if Vegas wins the Pacific. But an important game for Winnipeg just for reasons against Vegas. Who knows if they'll see each other coming up during the playoffs. Now, looking at our total, we're going to ride the Flames under again. We did that on Tuesday with the Flames and Utah. They went under in the first period. That was a winner, and we're going to do this again. And why we say that, Calgary, they have this incredible trend. First of all, 5 straight unders. That's not really why we're riding it. It helps. They're on a 5-0 under streak, but here's why. Calgary back at home after losing to Utah. 12-1 to the under. Their last 13 in the first period off a road game. So at home, off a road game, low-scoring games for Calgary, and 3 of the past 4 overall, they haven't scored a goal. They have allowed 3 goals in the first period the past 5 games. So I think that we'll see another under here. And looking at Anaheim, what they did, 3 goals in the first period. I don't think they're going to bust out again. So we'll see, even though the Ducks have gone over in the first period in 2 of the past 3 games, when you look back, they just don't score a lot of goals in the first period. And take a look at even games they scored 2 or more in the first. Trailed Utah 1-0 on March 12th, led Vancouver 1-0 on March 5th. The Detroit game on the 23rd, yes, that game went over the total, but still scored 1 goal. They scored 1 goal against Calgary on January 30th. Yes, they had a nice little streak here, 4 straight of scoring 2, but I think that was an anomaly. So we're going to go with the Ducks and the Flames under in the first period as our total best bet coming up on Thursday. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Proline TV. And you can check out all of the NHL predictions as well as NASCAR also. And a lot of NASCAR videos we're going to have for the next few days leading up to the race coming up on Sunday. Also, the Final Four coming up this weekend in San Antonio with all 4 top seeds left. So we've got a lot to discuss here on Proline TV. I am Kevin Rogers. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, best of luck with your bets.